soothing story time. Magic Lantern. The orchestra colonne completed, with muted strings teased by the tips of the bows, the most delightful movements of the sleep of Faust, the choir of spirits, and the dance of the sylphs, entirely under the spell of that hallucinatory music, and perhaps brought down a little too abruptly from the height of my aesthetic reveries into the prosaic brouhaha of the interlude, I turned to the occupant of the next seat, the physicist Forster, and took him to task, intending to relieve myself of the burden by means of this facile outburst. Admit, monsieur, that it is as well that Berlioz was born in 1803. Had he been born yesterday, he would undoubtedly have included an electrophone in his symphony, or the submarine cable, or some other phonographic apparatus. Without that ridiculous and nauseating romanticism with which it is manifestly infected and impregnated, we would not be applauding the 380-something's performance of his damnation today. Modern science has killed the fantastic, and with the fantastic, poetry, which is also fantasy. The last fairy is well and truly buried or dried, like a rare flower, between 2 pages of Monsieur Balzac. Michelet has dissected the witch, and with the assistance of the novels of Monsieur Verne, not one of our descendants 20 years hence, on hearing the dance of the sylphs, not one will be capable of the least sensation of that legendary nostalgia which distracts me now. But it is a charming distraction, monsieur, and a very amicable one. Oh, do you think so? I, monsieur, am of the old school. I feel the shots fired into Freischutz. Yes, assuredly, the one will kill the other. Alas, the one will kill the other. We no longer have a trace of illusion in our heads, my dear monsieur. We have an abstruse mathematical treatise in place of the heart, the appetites of a piglet in the belly, bridles and racing tips in the imagination, and a clockwork movement in the brain. Look at the man that we have all become, manufactured by the progress of science. If we still have some slight capacity for passion, it is because that old imbecile and simpleton, the romantic troubadour, the 1830 article, derided by the moderns, clings hard to the saddle within us. But have patience, he is dying. 10 years hence his whisper will no longer be audible. We shall all be built on the same model. Utilitarians, skeptics, and engineers. Ah yes, the great Pan is dead, and you are numbered among those who have killed him. Yes, you, Monsieur Physicist, you with your horrid mania to explain everything, to put everything to the proof, are one of the assassins of fantasy. Compared with you, the savant Coppelius himself, the man with the wax doll, could almost be reckoned an honest man, at least in my humble opinion. But the aforesaid Coppelius, if I remember rightly, was guilty of conjuring away the reason of the student Hoffman. I feel obliged to point out that, so far at least, I have not the slightest case of mental alienation on my conscience. I believe you suppress even madness, the last citadel in which a man of spirit, at the limit of his patience, might retrench himself. I suppress madness. I'm glad to hear it. It is a rare and noble privilege. Yes and no. You suppress it in the end, after you have analyzed it, explained it, determined it, localized it. You heal it as required, and by what means? By electricity and therapy. You have killed the fantastic, monsieur. Now then, said Andre Forster, suddenly changing his tone as if he half turned towards me, are you really serious in what you say? Where have you got hold of the notion that we have killed the fantastic, and that the dear nobleman has disappeared from our moors? Never, never in any era, not even the Middle Ages, when the mandrake shrieked in the middle of every night beneath the frightful dew dripping from the gallows, never has the fantastic flourished, so sinister and so terrifying as in modern life. We live in a world full of sorcery. The fantastic surrounds us. Worse than that, it invades us, chokes us, and obsesses us, and one would have to be blind or very obstinate not to see that. Yes, I know, hypnotism, magnetism, suggestion, and hysteria. The experiments of Charcot at the Salpêtrière. The wild women who stretch themselves out on their hands and merrily make hoops of themselves under the false pretext that the reflection of a spoon has manifested itself in their eye, the daily reproduction of the phenomena of somnambulism and the table turning of Mesdames Donatos. For myself, I prefer the demon-possessed, the nuns of Loudun, and the convalescents of St. Medard. At least the scenery was right. And you're in favour of appropriate scenery? Absolutely. Tombs by midnight, foggy winter skies, and far above the writhings and whitenings of the damned, the eternal battle of the clouds, and the black cones of cypresses shaken by the wind. That at least grips the nerves and meets the expectations of the imagination. And what a mise-en-scene the most trivial exorcism makes. But what do we have in place of that now? A miserable little whitewashed hospital room, very clean and very cold, a window without curtains, and thrown across a modern table some unhappy woman of Saint Lazare, stupefied in advance with morphine, and clustered around that female meet the decorated men, professors of the faculty, and the undecorated men, interns and curiosity seekers, utterly lacking in dignity. The modern victims of possession lack any authority, lacking, above all, the half-light of the church, the ambiguous light of stained glass windows, and the music of the organ. Admit that you miss all that Tony Janot stuff. Certainly I miss it, very picturesque to be sure, and sometimes moving. But how obstinate you are! If you would only take a little trouble and set aside for the moment your gallows, undulous plants and cemetery crosses, you could very easily convince yourself that we live, even in the fullness of modernity, in the midst of the damned, surrounded by the spectres of human heads and other horrors, that every day we brush up against vampires and ghouls. I will lay you a bet, if you like, that you number at least 3 or 4 witches among your acquaintances. I myself am acquainted with 2 egregores, and I shall easily be able here in the chalet to point out to you and to name more than 15 people who are absolutely defunct, but whose cadavers have every appearance of life. You're joking, monsieur. No more than you are, I think. Just take the troubles to look around you. We are in the full assembly of the Sabbat of Sabbats here, and I put it to you that every evening, every arena of Parisian society, including the opera and the gatherings of the great and the good of France, is a rendezvous of necromantic magic. Monsieur, this the joke to end all jokes. Then I shall put an end to it. Do me the favour of taking up those opera glasses and follow the directions that I will give to you. Look over there at those 3 elegant women on the balcony, dressed in plush with fashionable hats. 3 unmarried women, evidently. Look at those chalky complexions, those eyes blackened with coal, and the scarlet stains of their painted lips, like bloody wounds gaping in the flesh of those dead faces. Are they not veritable ghouls, damnable cadavers spewed from the tomb and escaped from the cemetery into the world of the living? Flowers of the charnel house sent forth to seduce, enchant and ruin young men. What is the magic that emanates from such creatures? For they are not even pretty, these marrow crushers, but rather frightful with their mortuary tint. and their blood-tingled smiles. Well, do you see the thinness? One of my friends killed himself for her. She has already devoured 3 racing stables and their proprietors, and is at this very moment consuming Pombard, the fat banker of the Rue de Petit Champ. The others are of the same ilk. The Comte de Santiago, husband of a delightful young wife, perhaps the most beautiful in all the Spanish colonies, and, what's more, father of 2 adorable blonde Murillos, is in the process of ruining himself for Irma, the oldest of the 3. By means of what horrible secret lust has the woman got her claws into him? Hold on, she has recognized me, and she is smiling at us. It is the smile of the ghoul, all moist with blood. Would you like to read a tale by Hoffmann now? Look down there, to the right of the forestage. See the beautiful Madame G. Take note of those eyes, with their irises of crystal, and that gleaming tint of porcelain. Her hair is silken, her teeth authentically pearly like those of dolls. She is enamelled, one presumes, to the navel, so that her ball gown may be cut as low as fashion requires. Thanks to the articulated springs in her bodice, she can say Papa, Mama, and Bonjour, Excellency. Produced for export, she is bound for America. She knows how to handle a fan, to curtsy deeply, to flutter her eyelashes, and to appear to breathe like a real person. Orcanson is surpassed, is that not the Olympia of Dr. Coppelius? And if a mechanism does not actually animate that mannequin on parade, what sort of vague and intermediary soul could possibly inhabit that breast, to hold between one's arms the rotating Sidonie, to run into those lips as cold as lips of wax? Does the idea not make you shudder? Use the opera glasses to delve into the dim depths of the ground floor boxes. See those flared nostrils, those linen pallors, those hypnotic eyes, those bloodless arms poking out of red crushed velvet, the nervous and febrile hands clutching bottles of salts or flapping fans. Those are the great melomaniac women of the world, the wives of merchant bankers and sugar refiners, all of them morphinated, cauterized, dosed, drugged by psychotherapeutic novels, and either medicated, anemiated, androgynes, hysterics and consumptives, the other possessed of the new aristocracy. Up there in the second tier I can see a young woman as honest and fresh as a rose, who never misses an execution. I know her and I recognize her. She was at Marchandon, she was at Gamahut during the summer of the crime of the Rue Montaigne. She was seen going to the Palace de la Roquette on 8 successive days so as not to miss the execution of Pranzini, the veritable fate. She is an exquisite young woman, but she has adored assassins for 20 years. She shivers with profound sensuality every time she sees the fall of a severed head. Eternally young, though, as if kept fresh by the sight of blood. The thirst for new sensations now extends to horrors. The witches of the Middle Ages were likewise excessively fond of the blood of executed criminals. Over there, 3 rows of seats behind us, that great hearty fellow with huge russet moustaches and the torso of a horseman is a specialist. He only loves consumptive women. All his mistresses die within the year. The lover of the condemned deserves a place in the finest comedy of Jules Lamater. That kind of bizarre love should be classified under the heading of demoniality. Finally, I see elsewhere a very pretty brunette. I shall not point her out to you, because she is my friend, whom the Holy Inquisition of the 15 and 1600s would most certainly have put on the rack, pricked and burnt. In the year of grace 1891, however, she comes and she goes, operating in perfect liberty. That lovely woman is on her 4th experiment. 3 gallant husbands have already died in harness, a master of wolfhounds and 2 perfectly healthy captains of the army, one of them a coursier. 2 years in the household, going, gone, emptied, crushed to the marrow, breasts hollow, legs shaking, broken puppets. She, meanwhile, is always plump, pink, and well-heeled, heir to their fortunes and, I suppose, their health. They melted like wax in the warmth of her bed, the 4th survivors for that moment, but he has already been deeply cut into. Have you read in Balzac's Conte Drôlatique a fable called The Succubus? Under the Valios, nothing more would have been necessary for a wife to be dragged in a shift to the Palace de Grève. But excuse me, monsieur, the music is beginning. Much obliged. The end.